Hello, awesome students. We are going to begin our discussion of vertebrates with Unit 4, specifically the fish as our starting point. But before we dive in, let's review what we learned in 3.6, or at least one component of it. And that was that the vertebrates are a subphylum in phylum Chordata. However, there are some differences between the vertebrates and the chordates, and I want to make sure that you know them. The first is that cephalization, remember that's formation of the brain, is more pronounced in vertebrates. Also, the muscles in the vertebrate body are arranged in paired masses, and vertebrates actually have a visible spinal cord. So, as we dive into the vertebrates, what we need to know is that the vertebrates have the presence of a nerve cord, which will become a spinal cord, and we actually see the beginnings of an advanced brain here. Now, just like with the invertebrates, we classified them by asking certain types of questions. Well, if you notice here with the vertebrates, we actually ask different questions now. We no longer are really concerned about the symmetry or the cell organization, because by now every organism has bilateral symmetry, and all organisms have tissues that are arranged into fully functioning organs. What we do ask, though, is what does the heart look like? And we will see there are differences in the vertebrate hearts. What does the skin look like? Basically, can I get out of water and live on land? How do vertebrates protect their young, which is very important? How is body temperature regulated? And then what special features suit them to the environment? More so, what are their environmental niches? Now, there are 7 classes of vertebrates. So we have kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, and now we get into the classes, which the jawless fish is Agnatha, which means without jaws. Cartilaginous fish, Chondrichthyes. The bony fish, Osteichthyes. The amphibians in Amphibia. The reptiles in Reptilia. The birds, class Aves, and rounded out with the mammals in class Mammalia. Now, the fishes are the only true marine vertebrates. So they're the only animals that live in water that actually have a backbone. As I mentioned a moment ago, Agnatha means jawless fish, and the 2 representative organisms are the lampreys and the hagfish. Now, the cartilaginous fish of the Chondrichthyes actually have skeletons that are made of cartilage, and this cartilage is actually a precursor to bone. Now, the cartilage in the sharks and the rays, as you see are the 2 examples here, is actually ossified and is pretty thick and heavy. Now, we do see that the jaws, however, of the sharks and rays is actually made from bone. So the skeleton is made from cartilage and the jaw is made from bone. Now, if you have actually ever noticed, you really never see any cartilaginous skeletons out and about, but you actually will see jaws or bones from jaws of the sharks and the rays. And basically, there are no shark skeletons in the ocean because cartilage is not very sturdy like bone, and therefore it does decompose quicker. Now, there are some advantages to having a cartilaginous skeleton. It is very flexible, it is lighter, and it does allow more movement of the animal in water. Now, the disadvantage is that the cartilage is not as sturdy, and it would not support the shark's weight against gravity if it were to live on land. Bone, on the other hand, as we have, is sturdy and hard, which actually can defy gravity, but of course we lose some of the flexibility that the sharks actually have. Now, this was just thrown in here to see if you would actually be this close to a shark, and if you were this close to a shark, what would you do? I know if I were this close to this shark, well, first of all, I probably wouldn't be in the water. But if I did get in the water and saw this shark right here, I'm pretty sure I would panic and freak out, and it would not be a very good afternoon anymore. Now, what you see here is the jaw skeleton of the great white shark. As you can see, it is fairly large and pretty terrifying to look at. Just imagine if you were actually this close to it, it's up close to it like this right here. It'd probably be a bit scary. Now what we have here is the jaw skeleton of a megalodon. Now these creatures were once roamed the ocean floor. Now this is an artifact from an auction out in Texas, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that it went for $9 million on the opening bid. What we have here on the left is a tooth of the great white shark, and on the right is a tooth of the megalodon. As you can see, both are fairly large, but the megalodon's tooth is many times larger than the tooth of the great white shark. So, now let's learn about a good scientist who has done a lot of work with marine organisms. Now, Dr. Eugenie Clark is actually a Floridian. She had a lab down in Sarasota, and she is renowned for her work on poisonous tropical fishes and shark behaviors. She basically figured out shark repellent. Now, is there such thing as natural shark repellent? Yes, there is. As Dr. Clark was doing her work, she actually noticed that the flatfish, which is actually a fish that pretty much is flattened and basically blends with the ocean floor. The representative one is the Red Sea Moses sole. If you actually look here, this is actually the fish right here. That is not a part of the ocean floor. That is actually the fish. Now what happens is the fish produces a toxin called pardaxin. And what the pardaxin does is it severely disrupts the cell membranes in sharks or other predators. Now what happens is that the skin that is not covered by the protein keratin of marine organisms is not protected against the pardaxin. And so the cell membranes get disrupted very easily. What happens is that the shark feels very scratchy and has a burning sensation, and then the shark will swim away. So just to review that, marine animals do not have the protein keratin like we have in our skin, so their cell membranes are not as protected. And so when the flatfish secretes the pardaxin, it actually makes the marine animal, in this case a shark, feel very uncomfortable, and so it repels it and the shark will fly away, well rather swim away, versus actually feeding on the flatfish. Now our last class of fish is actually the bony fish, the osteichthyes. Now these are the first animals with a bone endoskeleton. Now this is different from the echinoderms, whose endoskeleton had bony plates and did not extend throughout the entire body. In the bony fish, we actually see the bony skeleton that extends from the head region here all the way to the tail region. So the entire skeleton is made of bone. Now the three representative organisms here are trout, perch, and tuna, which many of you probably have eaten before. Now the skin of the bony fish cannot support life on land. And that's simply because the organism would dry out if it were to try to live on land. Also, there is no protection for the young. If you notice, or if you have noticed, fish lay hundreds of eggs all the time. This is because the eggs can tend to become food for other smaller fish, because once the female fish has laid her hundreds of eggs, rather than staying there to guard them, she actually swims off and continues her day-to-day activities. And so if, let's say, 300 eggs are laid by the fish, 50 of them may survive because the other 250 may actually be predators, or rather prey for the other predators like smaller fish and higher organisms that are in the water. And last but not least, there is really no regulation of body temperature because these organisms are called ectothermic. Ecto means outside and thermic means heat. So basically what happens is these animals assume the temperature of their surroundings. If it is cold around them, then their body feels cold. If it is warm, then their bodies feel warm. So again, an ectothermic organism is one whose body temperature assumes that of the surroundings. If it's cold, the body is cold. If it's warm, the body is warm. And that pretty much rounds out our discussion of the fishes. And we will continue our discussion of the vertebrates with the amphibians in lesson 4-2.